This will be really cool if I can just pull this up right here.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers. I'm Danny Hogger.
I'm Tavis Beam. No point this time?
No point. There's no point to this Wait, that's not true. That's
not true at all.
It's been a while since we sat down, just the two of us, and I thought it'd be really cool to get together and catch up on what we've been doing, take a little time capsule snapshot of what you've been working on, and let everyone else know what we've been doing. Yeah. And as well as take some time to spotlight 3 tips and tricks from some of our favorite famous teacher friends and just kind of discuss what's been going on. So to start, I thought it'd be a cool idea if we each grabbed a quote, and we haven't discussed these yet with each other. Mine is going to come from Jeffrey Friedan. We recorded yesterday. Jeffrey is a high school English teacher down in Riverside, California in the Inland Empire, and he had a journal that I'm stealing from him. He told me it was okay, so permission's been given. He said, "What's more important to the way that we live? Is it reality or is it our perspective?" Our perception. So right. I wonder what your thoughts are on that, as far as what's more important to like how we actually live day to day, the facts in the objective world, or the world is the way we see it.
I really see that as kind of like a yin yang, that you can't have one without the other, and they are both fundamentally important. I mean, we live within certain rules, certain confines of reality, but at the same time our own interpretations, our own imaginations about what's happening dictate so much of that, so much of how we feel, who we are, what we think of other people. So I think that it's a great quote, but I really think that it is kind of a yin yang. There is a balance between that. We have to remember both those things, and we're probably stronger for keeping both of those things in mind. Mm-hmm. I know that being a very science-minded person, I can often err so much on the objective reality that I will push out personal construction, the narrative that somebody has created in their mind, and I think I'm worse off for doing that, but at the same time you don't want to be too much in the other direction.
Each one can lead to faulty behaviors, right? If you live exclusively in reality, you could take all the miseries of the world personally and try to living that would be very deep and heavy. But if you only live in your own personal world too, then you are missing a greater portion of the objective world that needs to be realized. So I think you're correct to...
Can't walk around in your own creation.
Right, yeah. I think that you've really hit on the balance point of it. But I had kind of a two-timed reaction when he brought up the question. The first one was, no, of course we live in the real world, and all of us do, and that affects us more than anything else. But when I thought deeper, it's really our perception might be 60 or 70% of what we actually live in. You know, that our day-to-day routines, sometimes our monotony, things we have to do versus the things we want to do, the amount of the world we do see versus the amount that we could see. If we wanted to go out and like go see things and places, we do kind of get stuck. So I think the same is true of probably our mental state too. Right? We could think about everything in the world, but we often think about the same few things over and over. Like for us, we talk teaching so much that sometimes when we get together, we might have spent the whole time talking about teaching, and there's lots more. So it's always good too when we get out of our flow and out of those norms.
And meet people in a different profession too.
Sure. That's really good. I've sent a few invites out to some people to join our show who aren't teachers, including an astronaut and some other really cool people that hopefully we'll be reaching back out to us soon. So that was my quote. What's the one that you're bringing into?
Well, the quote that I want to talk about today is actually a quote that I share with my students. I have 3 quotes that I use to kind of impart my philosophy on them, what I want them to take from my class. And for me, teaching woodshop, teaching Makers Academy, hands-on technology, being creative, I want to teach the kids that, the quote is from Nick Offerman's book, Paddle Your Own Canoe. And he said, it's an incredible gift to be able to make your own fun. And that we spend so much of our time being entertained. We go home, we watch TV, we watch Netflix, we play video games, we do all these things where our minds are passive. And I tell them I'm not a Luddite. I have no problem with that. I like to go and watch Netflix and we'll binge watch a show or something. But to really take time to make sure that they are learning how to be agents of their own making, that they don't need an outside thing to entertain them. I tell them that, I grew up in the middle of nowhere. I had one television station and I had the original Nintendo with 4 games. And eventually you'd get bored with them and you'd go and you would play. And it was that play that made me want to learn how to juggle. And since I learned to juggle, that those skills took me to performance and to tour with the circus. It was that boredom that made me go and visit the local volunteer fire department and then become a member and go through all the firefighter training. And so now I've run into burning buildings and gone into roadside accidents. And so boredom is a valuable thing.
Totally.
And what we do with that boredom is what's important.
Yeah, boredom is like the workout of the muscle getting tested so that you can build up new skills and abilities. Just like when you strain during math, it's that point that the learning can happen and take place. And I'm going to make my own fun for a second, because when you mentioned we all can get into the Netflix groove where we get home and we just watch, and then we go to bed and we watched for hours.
Right.
Maybe we got work done and we did family, but we were also being entertained all the time. I stepped into Joshua Colley's classroom, who's been on the show a couple of times now, and they were talking about the book Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I sat down, and when the students asked, Mr. Hogger, have you read this book? I said, no, my eyes were watching Netflix. And they thought that was funny, but what I thought about later was like, I really don't spend that much time reading as I used to.
Yeah.
And one of the things we're going to talk about later in the show is about the value of reading. So,
My principal asked us what's one book that we've read recently, and it's like, I could list all the podcasts and I can list all the books I've listened to on Audible, but not a plug for Audible. But but I really haven't sat down.
Yeah.
And I think that we both have 2.5-year-old children, and so it's been a while since we've sat down with books
with leisure materials like that. And we both read a lot. I mean, we're consuming information. I'm sure you read ideas and plans and activities all the time for your class. And let's go there next. What have you been working on in class? But I'm always reading history sources, museums, articles, primary sources, but it's not for fun, leisure reading.
Yeah.
So what is going on in your classroom? What's new?
So this is my first year teaching Woodshop Makers Academy hands-on technology. I have the most amazing classroom. It is one of the few fully functioning wood shops left in California. It really seems like around the early 90s they kind of tore down all the wood shops to put in the computer labs, and now everybody's got a computer in their pocket. We've got Chromebooks, and they've got these spaces that they're turning back into wood shops. But thankfully this one has just been running since the 1950s when the school was originally built. And so I spent the first part of the year really just learning where everything is and getting my groove down and teaching something that is very different than what I've taught before. Right. I've been teaching this new class this semester called Hands-on Technology, and it's really a lot of fun because I get to just explore anything I want that involves the kids being hands-on and making things. So part of my goal for this is collaboration and working with people that they don't necessarily choose, and they got to build stuff. So I found a great website that has a paper roller coaster that I printed out on cardstock, and then the kids, collaborate and design a roller coaster with a little marble, and the marble rolls around, and it's got loopy-loops and funnels. It is just a fantastic thing that they are really into. That's what I really love about this more than anything, is I start to worry, we've been doing this for a couple weeks now, are they still into it? And they come in and they're happy and excited because they get to really experience this state called flow. And it's something they've been talking a lot about in happiness research, that we are happier when we regularly go into this state of flow. It's kind of timeless, where we're so into what we're doing, and they find that it really, the more hands-on it is, the more kinesthetic it is, we just get into this mind frame, and the kids are loving it. And it requires attention to detail, it requires focus, it requires communication. And so one thing I really talk to my kids about are these 6 traits that Google employees should have. Google did a massive survey of their best performing groups, and they came up with these 6 qualities, and I can't remember them all off the top of my head right now, but really the crux of all of them is that they put the group first and then themselves second. So it's really about having social emotional awareness. It's about being able to diffuse conflicts, to listen to everybody's ideas so everybody feels like they're a part of the group. And I tell them straight up, this is what the lesson is about. This is what's important, learning these 6 things. And there are conflicts that come along, and I have to be prepared to talk about it. And if I've done enough front loading, especially by referring to the 6 qualities that Google has found to be the best, I'm able to diffuse those those conflicts a little bit easier. And
Solid.
it's been so much fun, though. I absolutely love it.
That's really great. And you put a lot in there, a lot of thought, a lot of detail, a lot of planning. And when they are more engaged and can individually feel a part, it's easier for them probably to get into that flow too. You're not just saying, all right, everyone, do this, but it's you're all important to this. Now let's do this all together. So going along with the whole group is great. I think one of the things that I've discovered recently in first year teaching high school is variety is also very important, right? Like you're thinking, is this getting stagnant? Are they getting tired? Are we ready to move on? So if we just did a lecture day, then not do 2 of those back to back. Then let's do an activity day next. Then let's do a big group. Then let's do a partner group. And so just mixing things. But just in the course of even the way we do things, doing them better. If we are doing slides and we are doing a presentation, so World War II is so huge, we could study it for months and never really be experts. You know, there's entire courses and college courses.
People spend their whole career studying World War II.
Right. So one of the things I found interesting is letting them go and research. Do a traditional KWL, right? Start with them asking what they want to learn, but then actually have them go find it. And sometimes we do that at the beginning. We don't ask them for their questions. It's just something they would have done and they moved on past it. But so then you take the answers and you move them into single slides. So as you're moving through the progression of history and the war, you're also getting these little side notes that are interesting factoids, and it wakes people up from falling asleep or getting distracted, because as we go along with the big story, you're hearing lots of little stories in between, and they're fascinating. So there's always something that you're learning, and you're never really out of the learning loop. So I thought that was pretty cool. And a lot of them are humorous or interesting or slice of life stories that might not be so standards related, but they're really cool side notes. They're things you tell people at a party or tell your family on the drive home from school. And I think those little takeaways can be big. So that's pretty good stuff. And then other than in that, I mean, we're still recording new shows every Tuesday and putting those out, which has been great. The follow on Twitter from @ShowTeachers has been awesome with questions, and we're going to get to a few of those. But I've started course number 2 on my master's log from San Diego Christian College, and that's been really cool because I'm taking components of what I'm learning and the research that I'm reading, asking people about it in the interviews that we're doing, and it's making us all more reflective. And so that's kind of neat. And this course is focused on diversity, so I thought while we were together, if I could ask you kind of how you incorporate or embrace or enhance the diversity of your students in your room, and what does that mean to you? Because I know you are aware of it, and you're a caring, feeling teacher that likes to incorporate and welcome everybody from all different walks of life and their backgrounds, and you know their stories are important, but I just wondered what diversity kind of means to you, because we both teach in the East Bay and we have diverse populations, and how important is that piece for you as a teacher?
Well, I think the word is thrown around a lot, and oftentimes it's used in different contexts. So I remember when I was getting my master's degree in education, we talked a lot about diversity and how we should work in diverse schools. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I would love to work in diverse schools, but when I think of diverse schools, I think of schools that have lots of different population. And I really find that it's very valuable to have multiple groups and multiple voices in the school, not just one group. And I've worked in lots of schools where it was primarily one demographic. And I find that it's very enriching when I have worked in the schools where it is more of a broad swath of different socioeconomics, of different ethnic backgrounds, where there's just a true diversity in the sense of the word diversity. And then I feel like that it really opens us up to a conversation about what even this country means, and what does it mean to live in a diverse society. That the fact that in this classroom that I have, we are going to have people of different political diversities, as well as racial diversities and religious diversities. And how do we navigate that? How do we talk about and have those hard conversations in the class? And I don't think there's an answer to how do we have those hard conversations. It's the question that becomes the vehicle through which we have the hard conversation. Yeah, it's like, so how are we going to talk about this in a way where we're not going to offend somebody, even though you feel so passionately about this way? And I really, again, think that it speaks to the nature of what I believe this country was founded on. So if you can find a school with that true diversity, with a broad range of people from different backgrounds, it is a wonderful experience, in my experience.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned it as like an exploration, kind of like you did before. It's a togetherness thing. How can we? And even having that discussion is part of it. Mm-hmm. Even that those questions arise, mm-hmm. and we can build frameworks of how to talk about them. I think that's pretty wonderful. I liked when earlier in the year I had them do an oral history project, since that's such a huge part of what it means to be from anywhere, is to be able to record stories. And they each had to go research someone in their family and record a piece of story. And a lot of times of something they never heard before. Mm-hmm. And they brought in stories about their countries of origin, mm-hmm. or their family's heritage. And they brought back what it meant for their parents to live there, what kind of life they had versus the life they have now. Mm-hmm. And all of those things, I think, can be a welcome part that help us understand and respect each other a lot, mm-hmm. better. I don't think there was even a student in the room who didn't feel more belonging after having done that. And they learned a lot. So mm-hmm. that was one I thought was a good way to go about it, too.
They get a chance to hear the stories.
Mm-hmm. And they're not faraway stories, and they're not mm-hmm. just textbook stories. They're personal and meaningful. So as I go through these weeks, I'd imagine I'll be pulling some resources and references and quotes from research to discuss. So that'll be something to look forward to on the show as we go forward. Mm. Now we get to the tips and tricks portion of the show. I'm going to put a giant graphic on the screen. I wonder what it looks like, because I haven't done it yet. But it's probably covering our faces. What color do you want it to be?
Green. I like the green color.
I can do single colors. I haven't figured out how to blend or do any After Effects yet. Maybe in the future. Our first comment comes from Colby Sharp, at Colby Sharp, and he says, "My 5th graders spend more time reading during the school day than anything else. We never skip it, ever." So we talked about reading earlier, and that mm-hmm. we don't have as much leisure time, but why is reading important to our students, and how can we value that, or why should we emphasize that as important for our students?
Right, yeah. Especially today where there's just so much distraction, I mean, as we were talking about, it's so hard for us to even get that time in. Mm-hmm. Yeah, reading is such an important part of our development and developing with our students. And, there's always this debate about whether or not we should have things like SSR, or drop everything and read, mm-hmm. and how effective that they are. Yeah. And I don't know the answer. I've seen lots of different methods that seem to be effective, but I know that when I've had SSR in those times, there's always those students that pull out their book and are gone. They're focused. And then they're the ones who flip around, and then they go and get another book, and then they flip around, and they go again, and they spend the 20 minutes, the 30 minutes, and clearly that's not an effective use of reading. Right. And I think that teaching strategies on how to read, mm-hmm. especially textbooks, are important. Really teaching pre-reading. So before you read a chapter, go through, read all the headlines, read all the vocabulary, really use those tips and tricks that they put around the outside that tell you what that chapter is about. Mm-hmm. I always tell my students, you want to know what the chapter is about before you even read the chapter. Mm. And that way you don't get to the end and you're like, what did I just read? Right? But if you go through, and I have them do it, I have them even like photocopy the book and then circle and write and highlight directly onto the photocopy, and you have to do that a couple of times. You don't need to do the photocopying because they can just kind of mentally do that or take notes on the side. Right. And so then you ask them after 5 minutes of pre-reading, what is this chapter about? What are we going to learn? And when they can tell you that, it's like, look, we haven't even read the book and you already know what it is. And I think that is probably one of the most valuable things that I learned when I was in high school that helped get me through college, because reading is not easy for me. It's always been a struggle, and so those little things go a long way.
That's great. Really good strategies, and particularly good for the elementary crowd, too. Yeah. That's very good, because you build them up good strategies, they'll take them to high school and beyond. For me, one of the things that I think can be helpful in history is if we're trying to really do a good job of balancing multiple perspectives, we should be reading primary source material. So if we're in the middle of the Cold War right now, I'm having them read speeches by Churchill and by Stalin and by Truman as well. So let's try to understand not just what our paragraph in our book says that each country was feeling. Why don't you take the words from their leaders and then discuss what it means to be speaking at Congress in the United States versus what it means to be speaking to the electorate in Russia. And what are the perspectives? What's your aim of the speech? What's your goal? Who's your audience? And who are you really talking to besides beyond your audience? So I think that even opens up their interest more than just reading a paragraph that says things were very tense.
Yeah.
Okay, but what does that mean?
Right.
It's tense when I tell you to spit your gum out.
Yeah.
As
opposed to, what it meant to write a common sense before the Revolutionary War, Thomas Paine, and really read those the primary sources and understand the stakes.
Yeah, and you try to put yourself in those rooms with them, right? And what were they thinking? What does it mean to really declare independence here? What if they don't win?
Yeah,
What's going to happen to them? Is it going to be well read? I don't think so. So all the stuff in history about history being written by the winners really comes into progress there too. So let's read what the losers were saying,
right?
And what were they trying to?
And that really speaks to that quote of how it's won by the winners, and to really open up to the idea that there are multiple perspectives on history. And that kind of goes back to one of the original things we were talking about, of the objective fact versus the reality that we create.
There you go. It's all tied together.
And you have to have both conversations about what are the objective facts and what are the realities that we've created around the story.
That's right. Yeah, well said. Well-rounded. Thank you, Colby, for bringing us that conversation. Our next one today comes from Ryan Sheehy.
Ryan Sheehy, my former principal. Yeah. Wonderful principal.
I didn't know I was interacting with your former principal. This is the reality that we live in, my perspective, which is just, this is just some Ryan out in the world, in the wild. But he's local, and he's right here in the
right
Bay Area.
Here over... Yeah, over the hill.
Pretty funny. He says, make a positive phone call about your children on a regular basis. No parent ever wouldn't love getting that phone call.
Yeah, absolutely. And having worked with him for so long, he is really student-centric, and he really wants to build those great relationships with students and with their families. And those positive interactions are so important, especially with students that you are struggling with. I would take a lot of parents into my classroom when I had when I was teaching elementary school, and building up a relationship with the family is the best way to get to those kids that you're struggling with.
Yeah.
And for me, I identify so much with the kid who is struggling in school, because I was that struggling kid, and to be able to tell a parent who has a student who has been struggling, and they know is struggling, and they've been struggling for many years, and to be able to explain to them what you see in them, the potential that you see in them, and this moment that you shared, where what that student said was so special. I remember he had us do a thing where we wrote a postcard to one of our students. It was over Christmas break, and I wrote about just how this one student, and she struggled a lot, but she was so socially, emotionally connected to the other students, and really aware of how people were feeling on a deeper level. And I wrote about that, and I wrote it to the student, but I knew the mom would be reading it. And she came in my class, right when school started back up, and was thanking me so much, and how it just brought so much joy to her and her daughter to hear that from the teacher.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it feels good. Those are the moments.
It really does.
Where Ed 601, my first course from San Diego Christian College, talked about that it's really a community, and you should treat it like that.
Yeah.
So that's great stuff. I would say too, I've kind of shied away from phone calls during the past whole 5 years I've been teaching, but emails are fine too, and convenient and quick, and they may not be as good for the personal touch, but if it's positive, it can still be very nice. Especially for a parent who's very busy with work or family, to just get a positive note amidst all the things they're dealing with. It's got to feel good.
Yeah.
And the last one comes from our friend Tamara Letter and Mike Muhammad, who are both friends of the show and have been on our show. And A Passion for Kindness has come out, doing very well on Amazon. Tamara, congratulations. And the quote here is, kindness is a choice, plain and simple. You can be kind or not. And I think it definitely is. It sometimes takes more effort to be kind. It can be easier to be lazy or to be self-centered. Right. And it means so much, though, in the moments where people are kind to us. Maybe we forget that, but when we go out and do those kind things for students, those moments can really be very meaningful. I don't know if you can think of anything from this week, but I wrote a few letters for students that are looking for leadership awards or scholarships, and it doesn't take too long to really write those up, and they get touched when they ask you for one and you get it done in the same day, and they're excited about, maybe because I have high school seniors and juniors that are getting ready for college, and whether it's for a university or just for a scholarship letter, I think that it does mean a lot to them. Right. And they have a lot going on right now, so they might not tell you in a way that makes you feel like they really cared, but you know that in those days it really helps to have a teacher be an advocate and be a friend when you need them. So that's definitely one that I was feeling pretty good about this week.
Well, there is a Jim Henson quote. It was the other quote that I was thinking about sharing today. And it says that the kids don't remember what you taught them, they remember who you are. Mm-hmm. And so on day one, I put up a slide that says, these are my values. And the very first one is kindness. And I tell them that, life is hard. Middle school is doubly so. Let's make our lives as easy as possible when we're in here, and we can do that, number one, by being kind to each other. There's no reason not to be kind. A great example was with these marble roller coasters, and I had one group of boys that were working together, and they were being rude to each other. There was a playfulness to it, but there was an intensity, and I didn't like the tone, I didn't like the feel, and the people around them didn't like. And it was like anytime anybody would mess up, they would start getting angry with each other in this kind of playful way.
Sure.
But
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so I said to them, look, dude, we are making marble roller coasters. I cannot think of a single marble roller coaster related crisis that is so important that you should be mean to somebody. I mean, let's understand what the stakes are here. And then, in fact, and then I can go back to the 6 things that Google said that they want their employees to have. These are the things that you should be working on. These are the things that are important, not getting angry at him because he dropped the tape on the ground or something. So to me, it really is paramount that we are so genuine when we say to them that kindness is important, and then that we live that. We have to show them that, because they're not going to be kind to each other if they don't see you being kind to them.
Right.
And in those moments, those hard moments, that's especially important for you to bring the kindness if that is something that you really believe in and want to teach. And that doesn't mean you can't be hard. That doesn't mean you can't be firm. But it does mean that everything has to come from a place of genuine heart rather than, I just want control over you.
Right. Yeah.
And it's hard to balance that.
It takes
failed.
a while.
And that's another thing that's so important, is teach your kids that failure is always an option, and you've got to make clean up your mistakes.
Yeah. It's a good lesson. Whenever we have those moments when we can share those things, that's great because it comes from an honest place. Right. And that goes back to just being like a genuine teacher who's, like you said, going to be remembered for the person that they are, not for some pocket story that they have, but for real experiences. So we hope that you've got a lot from today's episode. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground.
We've been all over the place.
We're grateful for our friends who shared their thoughts with us on Twitter. I'm hoping I can reverse that and get that to fly back to my hand for the intro. We'll see if we can work that out.
I'm sure we can make that happen.
Yeah. For now, it's Tavis Beam, and I'm Danny Hogger. And
don't forget this time.
I told you it wasn't pointless. There's always a point to our show, and you can follow us on Twitter @ShowTeachers and subscribe on YouTube and on iTunes. We look forward to speaking with our next guest to come. Go back and watch some of the old episodes. There's a ton of really great content at inspiringteachers.podbean.com. We thank Podbean for that educational bandwidth donation that they've helped us with. And we will see you soon and talk to you soon. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, guys. For now, class is dismissed. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you later.